Come in. Shut the door. Welcome to the Nocturnal Archive. This is where we keep the stories the daylight rejects. The cold cases, the glitches in reality. Most people are satisfied with the comfortable lies, but you're here for what's hidden in the dark. I've pulled a file from the back. It's heavy. It's unresolved, so keep the lights low. I'm your narrator. Let's begin. The ocean has a way of keeping its secrets. We like to think we've mapped it, named its currents, tamed its edges with concrete and light. But out there, past the continental shelf, where the Atlantic heaves with the weight of the world, the ocean doesn't care about our maps. And it certainly doesn't care about our lights. December 1900. The Flannan Isles. A cluster of 7 rugged rocks jutting out of the violent swell of the Outer Hebrides, 20 miles from the nearest inhabited land. They call them the 7 Hunters. It's a fitting name. They are predatory, jagged, and unforgiving. The largest of them is Eilean Mòr. It's barely large enough to hold a few sheep, and, at its peak, a white pillar of civilization, the lighthouse. It was supposed to be a triumph of engineering, a beacon to guide ships safely around the jagged teeth of Scotland's edge. But barely a year after it was lit, the light went out. 3 men, Thomas Marshall, the principal keeper, James Ducat, the second assistant, and Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper. 3 men, experienced, hardened by salt and solitude, vanished into the mist. No bodies, no witnesses, just a locked gate, a stopped clock, and a logbook that reads like a descent into madness. So, how do 3 men simply cease to exist? How does a lighthouse, built to withstand the fury of God, become a tomb without a corpse? Let's open the file. The trouble began on the 15th of December. The steamer Arctur, passing the islands on its way to Leith, noted in its log that the light on Eilean Mòr was dark. A simple notation. A light that should be burning wasn't. But the weather was bad, the sea was rough, and the report didn't reach the Northern Lighthouse Board immediately. It wasn't until the relief ship, the Hesperus, arrived on Boxing Day, December 26th, that the silence truly began to scream. Picture the scene. The Hesperus cuts through the grey swell. On board is Joseph Mòr, the relief keeper, anxious to start his shift, anxious to see his friends. As the ship approaches the island, the crew waits for the standard protocol. Usually, the keepers would see the ship coming. They would hoist the flag. They would bustle down to the landing to catch the ropes. But the flagstaff was bare. No answering signal flare cut the sky. Just the rock, the birds, and the sound of the waves smashing against the cliffs. The captain of the Hesperus sounded the ship's whistle, a shrill, piercing blast that echoed off the basalt columns. He waited. Nothing. He fired a relief rocket. It exploded overhead, a thunderclap in the isolation. Still, nothing. Joseph Mòr was put into a small boat and rowed to the east landing. He would later say that the silence on the island was heavy, oppressive. He walked up the steep, winding stairs cut into the rock, calling out their names. Marshall? Ducat? MacArthur? The only answer was the wind. When Mòr reached the compound, the gate was closed. Not locked, just closed. He walked to the main door of the lighthouse. It was unlocked. he stepped inside. Now, lore and rumor have distorted this moment over the last century. You might have heard stories of a meal left half-eaten on the table, steam still rising from the potatoes. That's a ghost story. The truth, as written in Mòr's official report, is far more clinical and, in a way, far more unsettling. The kitchen was tidy. The fire in the grate was dead, cold ash, suggesting it had been out for days. The clock on the wall had stopped. The weights had run down. The silence inside that tower must have been deafening. Mòr went to the sleeping quarters. The beds were empty but unmade. He went up to the light room. The lamp was cleaned, trimmed, filled with oil, ready to be lit. The lens was polished. It was as if the men had prepared for the night, done their chores with military precision, and then evaporated. But here is the first piece of physical evidence that doesn't fit. The oilskins. In the entrance hall, there were pegs for the men's outdoor gear. Marshall's oilskins were gone. Ducat's oilskins were gone. But the third set, Donald MacArthur's coat and gear, remained on the peg. Lighthouse regulations were strict, extremely strict. You did not leave the lighthouse during a storm without your protective gear. It was a firing offense, and more importantly, it was suicide. If Marshall and Ducat went out, why did MacArthur stay behind? And if MacArthur eventually left, why did he go out into a freezing Atlantic winter in his shirt sleeves? Whatever happened, it happened fast. Whatever called them out there, it didn't give MacArthur time to put on his coat. Mòr searched the island. He found nothing at the lighthouse itself, so he moved to the landings. Eilean Mòr has 2 landing points for boats, the East Landing and the West Landing. The East Landing was untouched, but the West Landing, that was a scene of devastation. This is where the ocean shows its teeth. At the West Landing, an iron box containing supply ropes cemented into a crevice in the rock had been ripped from its foundation. Iron railings, thick industrial iron, were twisted like bent wire. A block of stone, weighing more than a ton, had been dislodged and moved. The damage was consistent with a force of nature that is hard to comprehend. But here is the discrepancy. The damage was found at an elevation of 110 feet above sea level. For water to do that damage, for a wave to tear iron from rock at that height, it would have to be a leviathan. A rogue wave of biblical proportions. And yet, this is where the story moves from a tragedy to a mystery. Mòr found the logbook. The keepers were required to log the weather, the maintenance, and the daily operations. Marshall was a diligent man. His handwriting was usually steady. But the entries leading up to the disappearance tell a story that contradicts the meteorological records of the time. December 12th, Marshall writes, "Gale north by northwest, sea lashed to fury, never seen such a storm." He adds a note about James Ducat. Ducat was a quiet man, reliable. But Marshall writes, "Ducat irritable." Strange. But it gets stranger. December 13th, the log reads, "Storm continued through night, wind shifting west by north. MacArthur crying." Donald MacArthur, a veteran sailor, a man known for his brawling and his toughness, a man who had spent years on the wild seas. Why was he crying? What kind of storm makes a man like that break down? And then, December 14th. Daylight. Poor, poor condition. Pray for God to help us. 3 seasoned lighthouse keepers praying for deliverance from a storm. But here is the fact that chills the blood. The weather stations on the nearby Isle of Lewis and the logs of ships in the area show that on December 12th, 13th, and 14th, the weather was calm. There was no storm. The sea was quiet. The winds were light. So what storm were they fighting? What was lashing the sea to fury only around that rock? Was it atmospheric hallucinations? Barometric pressure inducing madness? Or were they writing a metaphor for a different kind of storm? The final entry. December 15th, 9 a.m. Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all. And that was it. The ink dries, the book is closed, and 3 men walk out of the door into a calm day, never to be seen again. Let's analyze the theories. We have to look at this with a cold eye, even if the facts feel feverish. Theory 1. The rogue wave. This is the official explanation, the one the Northern Lighthouse Board eventually settled on. The idea is that a massive low-pressure system created a freak swell. The men were down at the west landing, securing the gear. Marshall and Ducat went down to check the ropes. MacArthur, seeing a monster wave approaching, a wall of water 100 feet high, ran out to warn them, forgetting his coat in the panic. The wave hit, swept them all away, and receded, leaving only the twisted iron as proof. It's plausible. The Atlantic is capable of terrifying violence. But if the logbook is accurate, the 15th was calm. Storm ended, Marshall wrote. Would a rogue wave strike on a calm day? And if they were swept away, why was the gate back at the compound closed? If you rush out in a panic to save your friends, do you stop to latch the gate behind you? Theory 2. The fight. Cabin fever. 3 men trapped on a rock the size of a football pitch. The darkness, the mercury fumes from the light rotation mechanism, the isolation. Did Ducat's irritability turn to violence? Did MacArthur's tears turn to rage? Imagine the scenario. A fight on the edge of the cliff. 2 men go over. The third, realizing what he's done, realizing he is alone with his guilt in the middle of the ocean, throws himself in after them. It explains the lack of bodies. It explains the distress in the logbook. But it doesn't explain the damage to the West Landing. A fight doesn't bend iron railings. A murder doesn't rip concrete from the earth. Theory 3. Foreign intervention. It was 1900. Tensions were rising in Europe. Some suggested a German submarine or spies. That the men were abducted. Unlikely. Why abduct 3 lighthouse keepers? What strategic value do they hold? And again, why leave the lighthouse in perfect working order, lamp trimmed, lens polished? Theory 4. The supernatural. We cannot ignore the local legends. The people of the Hebrides have always given the Flannan Isles a wide berth. They called it a place of the other. It was believed to be a domain of spirits. Keepers who worked there had strange rituals. They wouldn't mention certain words like swine or cross while on the island. They felt they were intruders on holy or unholy ground. Did the 7 hunters claim them? Was the storm Marshall wrote about not a storm of wind and rain, but a psychic assault. MacArthur crying, praying to God, "God is over all." It sounds less like a weather report and more like a last rite. Let's go back to the scene. I want you to stand there with Joseph Mòr on the 26th of December. The wind is howling now. The investigation is cursory because the weather is turning again. Mòr has to stay behind. He has to keep the light burning. Can you imagine that first night, alone in the tower, knowing your 3 friends vanished from this exact spot just days ago? Mòr reported hearing the wind calling the names of the lost men. He said the atmosphere in the tower was unbearable. He wasn't a man given to flights of fancy, yet he was terrified. There is one detail often overlooked: the logbook. Who writes, "God is over all," in a maintenance log? It's a phrase of resignation. It's not a cry for help, it's an acceptance. It implies that whatever was happening, whatever force was bearing down on them, they had accepted that it was bigger than them, bigger than the lighthouse. If we look at the timeline, the 15th of December is the key. The light was out that night. The log ends that morning. They made it through the storm of the 12th, 13th, and 14th, the storm that nobody else saw. They survived the impossible weather, and then, in the calm, in the quiet of the morning, they left. Why? Perhaps the damage to the West Landing happened days before. Perhaps the terror in the logbook was real, a localized anomaly. But the final act, the vanishing, feels voluntary or compulsive. There is a phenomenon known as the call of the deep. It's a vertigo, a sudden, overwhelming urge to throw oneself into the void. When you stand on a cliff edge, you feel it, the pull. On Eilean Mòr, surrounded by nothing but gray water and gray sky, that pull is constant. Maybe one fell. Maybe the others tried to save him. Or maybe, just maybe, something came up the stairs. The official investigation concluded the men must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane or some of the gear. Must have been. 2 words doing a lot of heavy lifting. It's bureaucratic shorthand for, we don't know, and we are terrified to admit we don't know. I think about MacArthur's coat, the oilskins left on the peg. It's the most human detail. It tells us that the end was sudden. You don't plan to vanish in your shirt sleeves. You are interrupted. What interrupts 3 men? A noise? A cry? A shape in the water? Look at the cliffs. They are sheer. 150 feet of vertical rock. If you fall, you don't hit the water immediately. You hit the rock. If they fell, there should have been blood. There should have been rags of clothing. There was nothing. The sea scrubbed the island clean. The Flannan Isles lighthouse is automated now. There are no keepers. The ghosts, if there are any, have the rock to themselves. The light still spins, cutting the dark every night, warning ships away from the hunters. But the mystery remains. It sits there in the archives, a cold case that refuses to warm up. We are left with the paradox of the logbook, a storm that didn't exist, a man crying who never cried, and a final sentence that sounds like a tombstone engraving. God is over all. Maybe that wasn't a prayer. Maybe it was a realization that out there, on the edge of the world, nature is the only God, and it is indifferent to your stone towers, your schedules, and your lives. The ocean took them. That is the only certainty. Whether it took them with a wave, a madness, or a monster, the result is the same. They became part of the archive of the deep. Next time you look out at a calm sea, remember Eilean Mòr. Remember that the surface tells you nothing of what lies beneath. And remember that sometimes the light goes out and no one is there to turn it back on. Good night.